Where did you get all this cash? The question sliced through the calm atmosphere of the bank like a sudden crack of thunder. It came from Nicole Anderson, a white teller, her gaze fixed on the thick stack of bills Jessica Brooks had just set down. But let's rewind for a moment. It was an ordinary afternoon at City Trust Bank in downtown New York. Sunlight poured through tall glass windows, lighting up the marble floors and casting long shadows across the polished counters. The quiet murmur of voices, the soft tap of heels, and the steady whir of money counters filled the air with a sense of routine. Then Jessica Brooks walked in, confident, composed, unmistakably refined. She wore a sleek black t-shirt, upscale dark jeans, and a light tailored jacket. Her designer handbag alone was a statement. Every step she took spoke of quiet success. She made her way toward the section reserved for high-tier business clients, a glass-enclosed space meant for privacy and professionalism. But from across the room, someone was already watching. Nicole Anderson, early 30s, blonde hair tied tight, sat behind the teller counter. The moment Jessica entered, Nicole's attention snapped to her, not with a welcoming smile, but with a narrowed stare, a silent assessment soaked in judgment. She watched Jessica's clothes, her posture, her bag, as if trying to find the crack in the image. Jessica, unfazed, approached the counter and offered a courteous greeting. "Good afternoon. I'd like to deposit into my business account." Nicole didn't answer right away. Her eyes narrowed. Then came the first hint of challenge. "This section is for VIP clients only. The regular line is over there." Jessica kept her voice calm. "I am in the right place. I came straight from my office. This is a business deposit." She sat and placed the cash neatly on the counter, organized, sealed, legitimate. But instead of processing the transaction, Nicole cocked her head and asked, "Where did you get all this cash?" Jessica didn't blink. "From my business." But Nicole leaned in closer. "I'll need to see some ID." Jessica complied, handing over her driver's license. Nicole studied it with exaggerated caution, then looked up. "Is this really you?" Jessica nodded. "Yes, it is." Still unsatisfied, Nicole pressed further. "I'll need another form of photo ID." Jessica raised a brow. "This is the first time I've been asked that." Nicole's response was clipped. "Per policy, I can request additional identification if anything appears unusual." Unusual? A moment earlier, a white woman in a designer suit had been helped without delay, no questions asked. But now Nicole's tone had turned cold, her voice as precise as a courtroom statement. "Sorry, this area is for VIPs. You should wait with the regular customers." Her eyes dropped to Jessica's outfit once again, the jeans, the t-shirt, the luxury bag, scanning for something, anything, to disqualify her. But it wasn't really about fashion. It was about assumption. Assumption wrapped in a smile that never reached Nicole's eyes. Jessica paused, inhaled, and replied softly but firmly, "I understand, but I am a business client. I'm depositing my company's revenue." She then opened her bag and set down a second stack of cash, clean, bound, and unmistakably official. The kind of cash that should end all doubt, but Nicole's suspicion only deepened. Instead of seeing a successful entrepreneur, she seemed to see a problem. She glanced at the money, then back at Jessica, and said, loud enough to draw attention, "And where did you get all that money?" That's not the kind of amount just anyone walks in with, especially someone like... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Jessica stayed composed. "As I said, it's from my business. I have all documentation if you'd like to verify." Nicole crossed her arms. "We'll need to investigate this further. It's standard to trace the source of large cash deposits, especially ones that seem out of the ordinary." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. A moment meant for routine banking had become something more, something revealing, something unforgettable. This time, Nicole didn't just say the word irregular. She emphasized it with a subtle edge, leaving no doubt that her focus wasn't on the deposit itself, but on the woman standing across from her. Jessica didn't flinch. She held Nicole's stare, calm but unyielding, as an invisible pressure settled over the small VIP customer room. The atmosphere turned still, like a storm gathering behind a pane of glass. On one side of the counter stood Jessica, elegant, composed, her hand resting lightly on her leather bag. On the other, Nicole, arms stiff, lips drawn, her eyes locked in suspicion and certainty. The silence between them stretched long, too long. And finally, Nicole broke it, her voice tight and laced with something that felt like control, disguised as protocol. "Well," she said, as if setting a trap, "if you're truly a corporate client, then surely you won't mind showing me something to verify that, just to be sure." Jessica recognized the tone immediately, a challenge meant to provoke, but she refused to give it weight. With the same quiet grace, she pulled her wallet from the bag and slid her driver's license across the counter. "Here's my license," she said evenly. "I hope that's sufficient." Nicole held it up to the light, twisting it back and forth as if she expected the truth to crack under the fluorescence. But there was nothing to find. The license was valid, clear, and official. And for a fleeting second, Nicole's confidence wavered, just for a breath. But she recovered fast. Snapping the ID closed, she turned back with a tight-lipped smile and a new layer of doubt. "I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks," she said coolly, "but a license alone doesn't quite meet the standard for a transaction of this size. We're very careful about things like this." Jessica exhaled slowly. She knew where this was headed. Still, her voice was steady. "I've given what the bank requires, but if you need more, I'll provide it." Nicole's eyes brightened, as if she'd just scored a point. "Good. Then let's see something a bit more solid. Another form of photo ID if you have one. Something more substantial." Jessica hesitated for just a second, not out of reluctance, but from the sheer strangeness of the request. Still, she complied, reaching into her smaller wallet and producing a slightly aged but clearly authentic student ID from Stanford University. She placed it gently on the counter. "This is my Stanford ID. I hope that helps." The reaction was immediate. Nicole's eyebrows shot up, and not from recognition. Her mouth curled into a condescending smile, and a quiet scoff escaped her. "Stanford? You expect me to believe you went there?" She paused, then added, "That card looks like something off the internet." It stung, not because of the insult to the card, but to everything Jessica had worked for. Nicole wasn't questioning the plastic. She was questioning the person. Still, Jessica remained calm, her reply clear and composed. "If you're uncertain, the university can be contacted, or your system can verify my corporate status. Everything I've given is real." Nicole didn't answer. She folded her arms, leaned back, and stared with sharpened resolve. "If that's the case," she said slowly, "then let's go one step further. Do you have a passport? That's what I'd like to see now." Jessica paused. That request for a simple cash deposit inside the country was not just unusual, it was excessive, and everyone in that room knew it. She looked at Nicole and searched for something, a flicker of fairness, of reason, even basic professionalism. She found none. Then Jessica took a quiet breath and delivered her reply, each word precise. "A passport isn't typically required in this situation, but if that's what's necessary to complete this transaction, I will comply. I just hope you're aware of what it might mean if your actions are driven by something other than policy." Nicole heard the message. The warning was there, polite but clear. Still, she didn't back down. If anything, it seemed to fuel her conviction. At that moment, Nicole wasn't just enforcing a rule, she was chasing a feeling, the belief that she was right, and that somehow, Jessica didn't belong here. The air between them thickened once more, heavy with unspoken truths. Jessica didn't break eye contact, though her expression briefly softened, not with fear, but with quiet disappointment. She had expected resistance, but not this level of disrespect. Nicole saw the look and did nothing. She just let her pride carry her further down a path that was becoming harder and harder to justify. Nicole stared at the Stanford ID for a few long seconds, as if caught between her instincts and the facts staring back at her. Then, with a quick motion, she grabbed the branch phone, punched in a code, and without even looking at Jessica, spoke into the receiver with a forced air of professionalism. "Stella, could you come take a look at something for me? I'd appreciate a second opinion on an ID I'm not sure about." Within moments, the frosted glass door slid open. Stella Reed stepped in, calm, composed, respected. Known for her steady presence and deep experience, Stella had a way of diffusing tension simply by entering the room. Her glasses and pulled-back hair gave her the look of someone who solved problems quietly but thoroughly. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice warm, even curious. Nicole barely waited. She held out Jessica's ID with a tone that hovered between sarcasm and suspicion. "This says Stanford. Doesn't look right to me. Mind checking?" Stella took the card, her expression neutral. She studied it carefully. The materials, the logo, the student number. Her brow furrowed briefly, then softened. Having worked in a university admissions office years ago, she knew exactly what to look for. After a moment, she handed the card back. "This is real, no question. The ID's legitimate, the design is accurate, and the details match. Nothing about it is off." Her tone left no room for debate. Nicole's face reddened. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but nothing came out. Stella's quiet authority had spoken louder than her doubts. Jessica remained still, saying nothing. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. There was no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness. Another moment in a long pattern she knew too well. Sensing the heavy silence, Stella turned to Jessica with a kind expression. "Apologies for the inconvenience. Just doing our due diligence." Jessica nodded gently. "I understand. Thank you." Stella gave her a respectful nod and exited the room, closing the glass door behind her. Now alone again, Nicole stood rigid, a flicker of embarrassment in her eyes, quickly buried under a mask of composure. But it wasn't over. Instead of letting it go, she doubled down. Jessica opened her bag and pulled out a neatly signed check from Brooks Financial Group. It was made out for $20,000. She placed it calmly on the counter. "Along with the cash deposit, I'd like to add this check to my company account. Hopefully we can complete the transaction now." But the moment Nicole saw the name on the check, her expression changed. The tension that had briefly eased came rushing back, thicker, colder. She picked up the check, holding it like evidence in a courtroom. $20,000? She repeated sharply. "From Brooks Financial Group?" She looked Jessica dead in the eye. "You're expecting me to believe that you're the owner, or even an executive, at a firm like that?" Her voice was sharper now, dripping with disbelief. Jessica didn't move. Her tone remained calm, though her patience was clearly being tested. "That's the name of my company. The check is real. You're welcome to call and confirm if needed." But Nicole wasn't interested in confirmation. She wasn't looking for answers. She was looking for a reason to doubt. And now, it wasn't just suspicion, it was something deeper. She didn't just question the check. She questioned Jessica's right to belong. Nicole's fingers tightened around the paper as her words cut sharper than before. "You honestly think a check like this would be handed over by someone like you? I doubt someone like you could even work at a company like this, let alone run it." There it was. No more coded language, no more polite distance. Just open disbelief, spoken aloud. Jessica took a breath. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't match Nicole's tone. "Verifying large transactions is completely reasonable," she said, her voice even. "If there's any doubt, I welcome you to call our office. Everything I've submitted is real. I'm simply asking to be treated like any other business client." It was a moment that revealed far more than a financial process ever could, and Jessica knew it. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. It was about something larger, something deeper, and it wasn't going to be solved by one ID or one check. It was only the beginning. Nicole hesitated for just a moment. The offer was reasonable, simple even, but pride quickly shoved logic aside. Deep down, she knew that calling to verify the check might lead to yet another embarrassing defeat, and she wasn't willing to risk that. Not again. Fueled by stubborn bias and her crumbling authority, Nicole made a reckless choice. With a sharp motion, she slapped the check onto the counter. Her cold stare dared Jessica to challenge her as she spoke through clenched teeth. "I don't need to call anyone. I know this check is fake. It's disgraceful that you'd even try a stunt like this. Fraud attempts happen all the time, but not on my watch." Jessica's eyes widened, not from fear, but from disbelief. The outright refusal to even verify the facts left her stunned. Still, she didn't raise her voice. "If you won't confirm it, I will," she said calmly. "I'll call my company right now. Everything I said is true." But Nicole wasn't listening. Instead, her hand dropped to the desk, pressing the small security button with deliberate force. Within seconds, the door opened and Marcus Hill, the bank security officer, stepped in. Tall, composed, and professional, he surveyed the room and immediately sensed the tension. Nicole pointed at Jessica, her voice hard and clipped. "This woman is attempting to pass a fake check. She refused to provide proper ID and is creating a disturbance. Please escort her out." Marcus paused. His eyes met Jessica's, calm, steady, and sincere. Something about the accusation didn't sit right, but his job demanded neutrality, so he waited. Jessica spoke, her voice level and respectful. "Sir, I am not causing a disturbance. This check is valid. If there are concerns, your team is welcome to verify it through standard procedures. I'm happy to cooperate." Marcus glanced between the two women. His silence reflected the pressure in the room, a quiet question aimed at Nicole's extreme response. Nicole, sensing her authority slipping, slammed her hand on the counter. "I said no more. Remove her now. I take full responsibility." Jessica stood her ground, though a deep disappointment settled over her. This wasn't just about banking anymore. It was about a deeper truth she knew all too well. Some battles couldn't be won with facts alone. The air grew heavier. The silence after her calm warning was suffocating. She met Nicole's gaze, disappointment flickering across her features. Not because of the accusations, but because of the hostility she'd been forced to endure just to be treated fairly. Nicole saw that look. She knew what it meant. But instead of retreating, her pride pushed her forward again. Trying to regain control, Nicole picked up the branch phone once more and summoned Stella, a move she'd already regretted once, but repeated anyway. Stella Reed arrived swiftly, her presence restoring a sense of order to the room. A seasoned professional, Stella was known for her ability to navigate tense situations without raising her voice. "What's the situation now?" she asked, scanning the room with a composed expression. Nicole hurried over, waving the student ID in her hand like evidence. "This card says Stanford. I think it's fake. Can you confirm?" Stella examined it carefully. It only took a moment for her to recognize the familiar hallmarks, the textured plastic, the official watermark, the student number formatting. She'd worked in higher education. She knew what authenticity looked like. "It's legitimate," she said plainly. "The ID is real. Everything checks out." Nicole's expression shifted, a mix of shock and frustration. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but she quickly realized Stella's word was final. There was nothing left to challenge. Jessica stood silently, watching it all unfold. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. All she felt was quiet sadness. Not because she wasn't believed, but because someone had fought so hard to deny her place at the table. Stella turned to her with a gentle smile. "Sorry for the inconvenience. We're just following standard protocol." "I understand," Jessica replied kindly. "Thank you for your professionalism." Stella gave a respectful nod and exited, leaving the two women alone again. But instead of resolving the matter, Nicole's embarrassment hardened into defiance. She refused to admit her mistake and instead began preparing for another attack. Jessica, thinking the confrontation was finally over, reached into her bag and pulled out a check from Brooks Financial Group, her company, made out for $20,000. She placed it gently on the counter. "Alongside the cash deposit, I'd like to add this to my business account. Hopefully we can complete the transaction now." Nicole's expression darkened. The sight of the check and the company name printed clearly across the top triggered a fresh wave of disbelief. She snatched the check off the counter, inspecting it as though it might dissolve in her hands. "A $20,000 check from your company?" she asked with sharp disbelief. "And I'm supposed to believe you own or run a major financial firm?" Jessica held her gaze, her voice even. "Yes, and as I've said, everything is legitimate. If you have doubts, call the company. We're happy to confirm." But Nicole wasn't searching for confirmation. She was searching for a way to hold on to her assumptions, and Jessica, standing calm, was the contradiction she refused to accept. Jessica knew this wasn't just a banking dispute anymore. It was a test of something far deeper. The air in the small room, already suffocating, grew even tighter as Marcus reached for the phone to begin the standard verification call. But before he could dial, Jessica raised her hand, calmly, deliberately. She stood tall, her movements measured, her presence commanding without effort. The patience in her eyes was gone, replaced with clear, unwavering certainty. Her voice, steady yet piercing, carried through the bank with unmistakable confidence. "I believe it's time to clarify something." She turned to face both Marcus and Nicole. "My name is Jessica Brooks. I am the CEO and founder of Brooks Financial Group, one of the most respected institutions in this city. Everything I've presented today is authentic, and I can prove it right now." Her words hit like a bolt of lightning. The room, once filled with the quiet shuffle of papers and footsteps, fell silent. Every head turned toward her, staff, clients, even passing security, all now listening, watching. But Nicole, arms crossed, let out a loud, sarcastic laugh. "CEO of Brooks Financial Group? Really?" She turned toward the nearby customers as if performing for them. "You expect us to believe that? Don't insult our intelligence. No one here's buying that fairy tale." Jessica didn't react. She didn't flinch. Her calm confidence only intensified the discomfort in Nicole's stance. Seeing the rising tension, Marcus stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Ms. Anderson, let's handle this the proper way. If Ms. Brooks is telling the truth, we may be making a serious mistake." Nicole snapped back, louder now, her voice cutting through the hush. "Marcus, are you actually falling for this? A young black woman claiming to run a firm like that? This is clearly a scam. I've seen it before." Her words echoed through the room. A few nearby customers gasped. Others exchanged stunned glances. Whispers rippled through the crowd, not about Jessica, but about Nicole. Jessica remained still, her face unreadable. Then she calmly reached into her bag, withdrew a business card, and handed it to Marcus. "Here's my direct contact. The chairman's office can verify everything immediately." Marcus took the card, his expression shifting as he recognized the name, the branding. Everything checked out. Before he could speak, Nicole's voice rose once more, brittle with panic. "Enough! I don't need more calls. I said escort her out. I take full responsibility." Now, every eye in the bank was focused on the small glass-walled room. Customers whispered openly. Several shook their heads. Nicole's outburst had revealed more than she realized. Marcus, sensing the weight of the moment, stood firm. "Ms. Anderson," he said clearly, "I won't take action without verification. That would be a serious violation of protocol. We need to handle this professionally." Nicole looked stunned. It was the first time Marcus had publicly contradicted her. Her face paled as anger and disbelief swirled behind her eyes. Jessica didn't move. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that dignity came from standing tall, not yelling louder. Marcus turned back to Nicole. "If you believe the check is fraudulent, I insist you call the number printed on it right now. Let's clear this up." Nicole stood frozen. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the check. She knew what was coming, but pride still forced her forward. Slowly, she lifted the desk phone and began dialing. The beeping of the buttons echoed like drum beats in the hushed lobby. The line rang once, then twice. Then, from inside Jessica's jacket pocket, a ringtone. Gasps broke the silence. Jessica calmly pulled out her phone, glanced at the screen, and answered without hesitation. "Hello, this is Jessica Brooks, CEO of Brooks Financial Group. How can I assist you?" The entire bank went still. Not a word, not a breath. Marcus stood in silent awe. Staff stared. Customers looked from Jessica to Nicole, whose face had gone completely pale. Every assumption, every accusation, every ounce of false authority collapsed in that one moment. Nicole couldn't speak, couldn't move. And Jessica? She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply stood tall, not to prove herself, but to remind everyone in that room exactly who she was. Nicole had never imagined things would end like this, her confidence crumbling in full view of the very people she had tried to impress. Now, exposed and humiliated, she stood in silence, unable to form a single excuse. Her eyes darted around the room, but no one looked back. No one came to her defense. Marcus remained beside her, silent, but the weight in his stare said everything. As a black man, he knew too well what prejudice looked like and what it felt like. He had witnessed it before, but rarely so openly, so boldly, and now he felt a responsibility to stand up for the woman who had endured it with such grace. Jessica ended the call, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and turned to Nicole with a calm but unmistakably resolute voice. "Miss Anderson, do you now understand who I am?" Nicole opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Shame had stolen her voice. Her composure cracked. For the first time, she truly saw the damage done, not just to someone else, but to herself. Around them, bank customers whispered, disbelief, disapproval. Even other employees avoided meeting Nicole's eyes. Her authority, her credibility, gone. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was steady, unwavering. "Miss Anderson, we've already wasted far too much of Ms. Brooks's time. I suggest you offer her an apology, immediately, before this situation escalates further." The words struck deep. Nicole's posture faltered. Her lips trembled. This wasn't just embarrassment. It was the realization that her actions had real, irreversible consequences. But Jessica didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She stood tall, not with pride, but with the quiet strength of someone who had chosen dignity over revenge, because she understood something Nicole was only beginning to realize. Prejudice doesn't just hurt its victims. It ultimately consumes those who cling to it. Before anyone could speak again, the door opened, cutting through the silence. Stephen Harris, the branch manager, entered with a swift, purposeful stride. A seasoned leader in his 50s, Stephen carried an air of calm control. His sharp brown eyes scanned the room, taking in everything in a matter of seconds. Jessica's composure, Marcus's concern, and Nicole's unraveling confidence. Recognizing Jessica immediately, he approached with concern. "Jessica," he said, his tone respectful but serious. "It's good to see you, though I'm sorry under these circumstances. Clearly something's gone wrong. What happened?" Jessica gave him a polite nod. Her voice remained calm even after all she'd endured. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harris. I'd prefer Marcus fill you in." Stephen turned to Marcus, who stood tall and ready. Without hesitation, Marcus walked through the events, from the moment Jessica arrived with valid documentation to the repeated, unnecessary demands for ID, to the baseless accusation of fraud and the deeply inappropriate remarks that followed. He recounted Nicole's comments word for word, sparing nothing. Stephen's expression darkened as he listened, his brow furrowed deeper with every passing moment. And when Marcus quoted the discriminatory remarks, Stephen's jaw clenched. Finally, he turned to Nicole, and what remained of her defenses fell away under his gaze. "Nicole," he said slowly, "I can't believe what I've just heard. Do you have any idea how serious your behavior has been?" Nicole's voice caught in her throat. She couldn't speak, couldn't look him in the eye. Her face had gone pale. Stephen continued, his tone harder now. "We've built this institution on respect, on fairness, on trust, and you treated Ms. Brooks, a highly respected client and leader in this city, with the exact opposite of those values." She tried to speak, but there was nothing left to say. Turning back to Jessica, Stephen's expression softened. "Jessica, on behalf of City Trust Bank, I offer my sincerest apology. What happened here today is unacceptable. It does not reflect who we are or who we strive to be." Jessica gave a quiet nod. She accepted the apology, but her silence spoke volumes. This experience had left its mark. Stephen saw it, and he knew how much the bank stood to lose. "Marcus," he said firmly, "thank you for your professionalism. Please write up a full report. I'll be taking this directly to HR today." Marcus nodded, visibly relieved to have leadership back in control. Stephen then turned to Nicole one final time. His voice, once calm, now carried the unmistakable weight of consequence. "Nicole, I'm deeply disappointed. We will be having a very serious discussion about your conduct, and you should prepare for the consequences that come with it." Nicole stood frozen. Her career, her image, everything she had built, now cracked and slipping through her hands. Her silence, once a show of control, now exposed only fear. The damage was done, and it wasn't just her mistake. It was a moment that revealed the truth about power, about respect, and about what happens when someone finally stands up and refuses to be diminished. And as Jessica stood tall, surrounded by eyes filled with newfound respect, one thing became undeniably clear. She had never needed to prove who she was. She had simply needed to be seen. Jessica remained poised, standing with quiet dignity. But behind her calm eyes flickered something deeper, not triumph, but sadness. Because even in victory, she knew the damage inflicted by discrimination doesn't vanish overnight. Still, she also understood that moments like this, as painful as they are, reveal what fairness and respect truly mean in our society. Then came the turning point, one that every person in that bank would remember. Stephen Harris turned to Nicole. His expression was cold, his jaw tight. In that instant, the air seemed to freeze again. Everyone, staff and clients alike, understood that what came next would not just determine Nicole's future, but serve as a defining statement about City Trust Bank's values. Standing firm, Stephen addressed her with no trace of the professional warmth he usually reserved for his team. "Nicole Anderson," he said, his voice sharp and final, "based on what I've seen and heard today, I have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Your blatant, unacceptable behavior, rooted in racial prejudice, has damaged this bank's reputation and dishonored our commitment to the community." For a heartbeat, Nicole didn't react. Then her face went pale. Her breath caught in her throat. She flushed, then went ghostly again as the weight of Stephen's words settled over her. "Mr. Harris, please," she stammered, her voice shaking. "This is a misunderstanding. I never meant to discriminate. It wasn't my intention." But Stephen raised a hand. His patience had run out. "No more excuses, Nicole. I've received multiple complaints about your treatment of customers. This isn't the first time. It's just the first time it was exposed for all to see, and I gave you chances. You refused to change. Now, I have to make the right decision for this bank and for our values." Nicole looked around desperately, searching the faces of her colleagues for someone, anyone, who might defend her. But all she saw were downcast eyes, stiff expressions, and quiet disapproval. Not a single person stood by her side. Her composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as panic took hold. That was when Marcus stepped forward, calm, respectful, but firm. "Miss Anderson," he said steadily, "you'll need to gather your personal items and leave the building. This is Mr. Harris's final decision. I suggest you comply." Nicole turned toward him, her voice now just a whisper. "Marcus, please. You know I've always done my best." But Marcus didn't waver. "We all have a responsibility to uphold the standards of this place. And today, you crossed a line we can't ignore." Realizing resistance was useless, Nicole lowered her head. Shame clung to every movement as she returned to her desk, slowly collecting her belongings with trembling hands. She didn't look up. She couldn't. Jessica stood silently, watching. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. There was no joy in what had just happened, only a deep sorrow for what ignorance and unchecked bias can destroy. As Nicole made her way toward the exit, she passed Jessica without a glance. But Jessica spoke, not out of anger, but with steady clarity. "I hope today showed you that discrimination doesn't help anyone, not even the person holding on to it." Nicole paused for a moment, but said nothing. And just like that, the bank doors closed behind her. A stillness settled across the room, heavy, reflective, as if the entire building had stopped to process what it had just witnessed. Stephen turned slowly to the remaining staff. His gaze carried weight, not just as a manager, but as a man speaking for an entire institution. "What happened here today," he said quietly, "is not just an HR matter. It's a test of who we are, and I want every one of you to know this bank stands for fairness, dignity, and equal treatment. Always." And with that, the silence deepened. Customers and employees alike stood in quiet reflection. The tension had finally lifted, replaced by something far more powerful, understanding. Then Stephen turned to Jessica, his voice softened with real remorse. "Miss Brooks," he said, bowing his head slightly, "please accept my personal apology. This was not just a failure of one employee, it was a leadership failure. I should have addressed this long ago." Jessica met his gaze and offered a small, sincere smile. "What matters is that we learn, all of us, and grow from it." Stephen nodded, visibly moved by her grace. "Please, allow me to personally escort you to the VIP lounge to finish your business, with the respect you've always deserved." Jessica lifted her handbag and walked beside him, graceful, steady, and unshaken. As they moved through the main hall, every head turned. But this time, it wasn't suspicion that followed her. It was respect. One by one, employees stood. Some offered soft nods. A few lowered their heads slightly in acknowledgement. Clients gave warm smiles, silent gestures of solidarity and apology, and Jessica, as always, walked with quiet humility. Because she never needed to win. She just needed to be seen. Jessica carried no resentment in her heart as she left the VIP lounge, only quiet reflection and a deep compassion for what prejudice does not just to its victims, but to society as a whole. Stephen had led her there personally, into a spacious, softly lit room that radiated the respect she should have received from the start. He arranged the paperwork himself, ensuring her transaction was handled with care and dignity. Throughout the entire process, Jessica remained graceful and composed. She never brought up the ordeal again. She issued no rebuke, made no demands. Her silence was powerful, her dignity undeniable. And with every moment, Stephen's respect for her only deepened. When the documents were finalized and placed gently into her hands, Stephen spoke with a solemn promise. "All set, Jessica, and once more, I'm deeply sorry. What happened today should never have happened. But I give you my word, we will implement real change. We'll make sure this never happens again." Jessica looked up, her gaze warm and clear. "I believe you will, Mr. Harris," she replied. "And I hope this becomes an opportunity, not just for correction, but for learning and real growth." Stephen smiled, humbled by her grace. As Jessica exited the VIP lounge, every person in the bank watched in silence, not with judgment, not with hesitation, but with deep and open respect. She walked with quiet power, her steps echoing through the marble hall. And though no one spoke, the energy in the room had shifted completely. Staff and customers offered her small nods, gestures of apology and admiration, and Jessica, never needing applause, responded with a gentle, knowing smile. She stepped out into the sunlight and into the world, leaving behind a space forever marked by a powerful lesson in human dignity. But her story didn't stay behind those glass doors. Within hours, what had happened inside City Trust Bank spread far beyond. Photos, videos, and first-hand accounts appeared on social media, and the response was immediate. Nicole Anderson, once an anonymous teller, became the subject of intense public scrutiny. Outrage and disappointment poured in from every direction. She lost her job, and far more. Friends distanced themselves, colleagues stopped calling. Even family struggled to defend her choices. By contrast, Jessica Brooks, once a quiet, unknown name, became a symbol of dignity, composure, and forgiveness. Her story was shared by thousands, her image honored across forums and news platforms. But she didn't chase attention. She didn't accept media interviews. She stayed quiet, focused on something far more meaningful. A few days later, Jessica requested a private meeting with Stephen Harris. In that calm, professional setting, she made a proposal. "Mr. Harris," she said, "I don't want to file a lawsuit. I'm not here for compensation. What I would like is for City Trust to commit to change, to launch a full anti-discrimination training program for all employees. I believe that's the most valuable way forward." Stephen was stunned by her generosity of spirit. He listened, deeply moved. "Thank you, Jessica," he said. "We'll launch this immediately. You have my full support. This will become a defining part of our bank's future." And true to his word, in just a few weeks, City Trust Bank implemented a sweeping, in-depth anti-bias training program. Leading experts in ethics and diversity were brought in. Every employee, from front desk to leadership, took part. The effects rippled outward. Inspired by Jessica's response, other companies in the city began creating similar programs. Workshops were held. Conversations began. A movement, not of shame, but of reflection and growth, started to take root. And Nicole? Months later, after the noise faded and the spotlight moved on, she began confronting her own deeply buried biases. It wasn't easy, but in time, she started to understand. She learned that true peace only comes when we stop defending our prejudice and start dismantling it. Jessica's story left a message that echoed across communities. Respect is not defined by status. Dignity is not measured by wealth, and worth is never determined by skin color. It is shown in how we speak, how we listen, how we treat others when no one's watching. What began as a painful moment became a turning point for thousands, a reminder that the world can change, but only if we're willing to change first. Jessica continued her journey with peace in her heart. She knew there would be more battles ahead, but she also believed something powerful, that if each of us chooses compassion over judgment, truth over silence, and fairness over fear, we can build a world where dignity is never questioned and respect is never withheld. And so she walked on, not just as the woman who endured injustice, but as the voice of something greater, a living reminder of what it means to rise and let others rise with you. What about you? Would you have responded like Jessica? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching. See you next time.